What up, everybody? Happy Friday. Happy get paid day, or get even more paid day for Brandon Aiyuk. We'll talk about that. You're going to get that lump sum, right? That's the beauty of these contracts when you get the extension. Sure, he was going to get a little bump up. I think it's something like 14, 15 million this year under the 5th-year option. But when you sign the big deal, that cap hit is pretty light in year one, but the signing bonus comes in. And again, it's kind of what I talked about yesterday. For any people who haven't paid attention here, get the money up front. A little bit tougher on ownership paying that money up front, but it's actually a little bit easier on the cap, having that spread out into future years. Check out my discussion about Deshaun Watson, the restructuring, what the Eagles are doing with Jalen Hurts, the time value of money. I called it cap alchemy, being able to figure those things out. And maybe I'll just plug right up top, hey, check out unexpectedpoints.com. All my research is there. You see the initial power rankings that I came out with, comparing them to the market. You can see a little bit on there that I'm lower than the Bengals than the market. So that's one of the differentials there. Also going to have the Bayesian quarterback rankings. I guess I'll come out on Tuesday, since Monday is, who wants to read this stuff over a 3-day weekend? So that'll come out. And then we'll have the cadence, that content, boom, 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 coming out during the regular season. Check everything else out. Actually, I shouldn't say it's just unexpectedpoints.com now. I finally got around to getting that URL. So when I post things on the X, Elon no longer will be throttling, will be shadow banning my content on X. I don't know if they were actually driving down engagement on Substack posts, but they were not allowing the pre-populated image to come up on those posts, because Substack came out with this Twitter-ish sort of thing, which in my opinion doesn't really compete with it at all. But anyway, so there was a little bit of a conflict there. So go check it out, unexpectedpoints.com. That's it. No Substack anymore. Or you can go to the Substack if you want. And it works. It works either way. Appreciate the support there. The subs are starting to roll in, even in advance of the real big content push that we're going to see in the next few weeks. But these pods are going to be part of this. I'm going to try to do this a little bit more often. I've figured out that the impediment, the bar that I have to clear when it comes to ideas that I'm just typing around with, running some numbers, looking up some things on the web, getting that to an article, the pain threshold is much higher on that, whereas it's not quite as high here. And that's what I was doing this morning. Now, what will happen sometimes, and I apologize for this, for those who were expecting me to go on earlier, is the time got pushed back as I started to do more and more research, as I thought to myself, Brandon Aiyuk is interesting, but we probably could have skipped this whole saga and just gotten this deal done at the beginning of the offseason. Was a little bit more interesting to me is what the Niners are going to potentially do with Trent Williams. And that's the next thing in their agenda. So I might actually spend the majority of the time talking about that. So I added that to the thumbnail, added that to the title of the podcast, moved it back, did some research, had to go pick up the kids. Now I'm back from that. And now we're here. We're live. 1 p.m. is probably a better time Eastern to do this anyway. All right. Now that I'm done with that very belabored introduction, let's get into what the real content here is. So we don't have all the details, right? But what we know so far, according to Adam Schefter, I think had to adjust this, or had to adjust maybe it's a delete and adjust, because I don't see a thing saying this was edited, where first he said something about August 10th and now it's August 12th. But this is the Schefter announcement. It says, in the end, this is crafted straight from I would say straight from John Lynch, but I don't know if I'd even put him in charge of doing this. I'd have someone else in the 49ers organization put it together and then sent it over to Shefty. And then he, made a few quick edits and sent this out. It says, in the end, Brandon Aiyuk accepted the same deal that has been on the table since August 12th, per league sources, aka the San Francisco 49ers front office. His hold in other words, when he wasn't going to, he was just hanging around in training camp to avoid the fines, the daily, $50,000 fines and all that stuff. did not alter any part of his new 4-year, $120 million extension. He took the same deal that had been there in previous weeks. Hold in over. All right. So 120 million over 4 years. Let's do some quick math on that. 30 million per year. So without the details, there are differences in guarantees. There are differences in how much money you're getting up front. Because again, a dollar today is worth more to a player than a dollar in the future. Um, there are details about rolling guarantees that are different and things like this. But at least first impression right up the top, where we want to look at like how this compares to other wide receiver contracts, and I'll bring them up here in average per year. You have Justin Jefferson at the top with 35 million a year. And again, over the same time frame, 4 years, it was this offseason. You have CeeDee Lamb, just happened, $34 million a year. Again, same time frame, a 4-year deal. You have AJ Brown, who got, I guess this is almost like his third contract in a way, because I think it was an extension onto the extension that he was given when he first got to the Eagles at 32 million a year. It's a little bit shorter though, 3-year deal. Amon-Ra St. Brown happened at the beginning of this offseason. And if you're an NFL team, I'll tell you, just get these deals done at the beginning of the offseason. It's amazing so many times. Amon-Ra St. Brown is probably one where I'm not in love with the deal, but I think you have to pay him more if you wait until later in the season. And I remember back a few years back, DJ Moore, not this most recent extension that's on here for 27.5 million, but the one before that he did with the Panthers. He did that early in the offseason before this whole the whole wide receiver market just went exponential as far as how high it was jumping up. So, give a little bit early, teams, to get these things done early. But anyway, if we're counting down guys who are at least on a very superficial level making more per year, it is Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Brown, AJ Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who is over him by a cool $2,500 over over 4 years. That has me. This contract is $30,250,500. Tyreek Hill is written as the same, but remember, this was signed in the past. This is for an older player. We could probably think about that as a little bit of a higher deal. The one guy I really want to talk about is Jalen Waddle. This is interesting to me because I could kind of get why Waddle did not get top money, because he's a high draft pick. He has been productive over the years, but not like a huge, outstanding, breakout-ish sort of. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. A breakout, yes, but not as dominant, perhaps, as what you would label this last year from Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe not the equivalent there. And if we go to the numbers on what we've seen from Waddle over the years, I mean, first of all, he was doing it earlier, so you get a little bit of a discount for that, right? It's after 3 years. You're still going to roll the 4th year into it. You're going to roll the 5th year option into it. So your amount per year, even on an equivalent extension, would be a little bit lower. Now, we only got 3 years on the extension, so the extensions are going to roll and go for with the rolled up contract. They're going to be the same amount of time for Waddle. I mean, it's the amount of years going forward for Waddle and for Aiyuk, but one of them came into the NFL a year later than the other. So Waddle got a little bit less money on a shorter deal, and I guess that makes some sense. It's only 3 years. But if you look at the numbers he's had, I mean, it's over 1,000 yards for 3 straight seasons. He missed some games this last year that may have hurt his perception a bit. His, outstanding yards per reception number, which is, again, it's also something that has been a huge factor for Brandon Aiyuk, was not as great as it had been in the past. So that might have been something. If we scan down here, we see that his yards Actually, I don't see. Do they have the yards per target on here? Oh, I'm looking at the advanced. No wonder I couldn't see it. Okay, here we go. So yeah, so the yards per reception, it was 18.1 in 2022 for Waddle, 14.1 last year. Still pretty good. Yards per target, though, 9.8 versus 11.6 the year before. So Waddle was not getting paid off of his best year. In fact, off of his sophomore NFL campaign here, where he put up 1,356 yards, 18 yards per reception, not a ton of touchdowns, eight, but the 11.6 yards per target, which is right up there at the top. 117 targets isn't a ton, but of course you have Tyreek Hill in that offense, gathering up a bunch of targets. Waddle probably makes more money than what he did actually on this extension. Because if you look at Aiyuk, and this is the one thing that I think kept Aiyuk's contract in the reasonable basis, despite the fact of him playing hardball and all that stuff, is that this is his fourth year in the NFL. He stepped up to 1,300 yards, only 105 targets, not that many targets. 16 games, so he didn't get the full 17 games, but you know what I mean. But it's really this yard per target number that was outstanding for Aiyuk at 12.8, made him super, super, super efficient. 17.9 yards per reception. So he's also, this huge success rate. I mean, the success rate is through the roof. How much of that is San Francisco offense, where they have a successful play 70% of the time that he's being targeted? Even in Waddle's best years, it was in the 50s. And most players are topping out maybe around 60%. He's 70%. So that, like, they're kind of buying high in a way on Aiyuk here because of that, because we're coming off of by far his best and most efficient season. At the same point in time, he does bring attributes for a down the field receiver that should get more money. I'm honestly a little bit ambivalent when it comes to whether someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's been productive over years, should get more money, or someone like Aiyuk, who has a skill set that's less replaceable, I guess. And replaceable is the wrong word, but because you can't fully replace it. But finding guys who can get underneath targets, lower A dot targets. You can do some of that to tight ends. You can do some of that to running backs. You can do some of that to a lot of different receivers that don't cost a lot when it comes to the NFL draft capital or free agency capital. You can't do as much of what Aiyuk was doing down the field without it. So I think the 49ers got a pretty good deal here. I think they were smart to play a little bit of hardball here. I know there could be some hard feelings, this sort of stuff, but once the checks get cut and the contracts get signed and the pads come on and the football starts being played, I think it's a pretty minor factor, all those different things that happen during the offseason. And I think the NFL CBA helped a lot here with the fact that, yeah, he could do this hold in if he wanted to and avoid some of these 50 grand fines, avoid other stuff. But eventually it was going to come. The fines were going to start coming from the team. The checks, the game checks were going to be threatened. And if they wanted to, they could play a little bit more hardball even during training camp and try to say that he was in violation of that, and he would have owed somewhere in the neighborhood, millions of dollars, because you can also take away game checks for missing preseason games under the CBA. So I thought the 49ers front office did a really good job of being, standing up, not just giving in to exceeding to contract demands, making him in that, CeeDee Lamb sort of category, which he may have wanted a few weeks ago. Now, who knows what the pre-August 12th offer was, but if this, I believe this, who knows, this might have been the same offer as August 12th. Understanding that they had leverage, understanding that the CBA is not conducive to the players holding out during the regular season unless they're a really established player who's already gotten paid a lot of money. Also, I think that helps. When you have a player who hasn't gotten paid yet, that can have an effect of giving a bit more leverage to the teams, because they don't necessarily have the big check to sit back on. I mean, if we're looking at Aiyuk here, let's just look at this. This will be a good way of looking at it for an example. if you look at how much he's been paid over his career, it was going to be 14.1 million this season on the 5th-year option. Remember, he's not going to get that money. It's all base salary. Wasn't going to get that money this season unless he showed up to games. He would just start getting fined on there. In prior years, 3.9 million the year before, 3.4 million, 2.8 million, 2.2 million. Actually, I'm sorry, those are the cap numbers. Look at the cash. 2.3 million the year before, 1.7, 1.2, and with the signing bonus and everything, 7.3 million in his first year. Now you might say, "Oh, 7.3 million. My God, that's a ton of money. These guys, should have no problem. They should have a money worry in the world." Well, if you think you're going to be a superstar receiver, getting paid 5 years ago a lot of money, you might not feel as secure as you would if you were a guy going into your third contract and you already got that signing bonus money. You already got those tens of millions of dollars in signing bonus and a much higher salary on your second contract. Then you could start to play a little bit more. Or if you're a really, really early NFL draft pick, there's another thing people don't think about necessarily enough is that with Aiyuk being the 25th pick in the NFL draft, his per year money over those first 4 years, we're talking about somewhere in the range of $3-ish million a year. Look at what happened with Nick Bosa last year, who was the second overall pick in the draft, right? So he even has a little bit of a better situation to think about. He got paid $23 million in his first year in the NFL. Rookie, $23 million. Now it's small amounts after that, $2 million, $4 million, $5 million. Still, we're talking about a lot more money that he was getting paid over the first 4 years of that contract. Multiples more money that he was getting paid over the first year of that contract, if we're talking about Nick Bosa here, in comparison to Brandon Aiyuk. That gives him more flexibility and more leverage to potentially hold out in this situation. So the 49ers played it well, used the CBA to their advantage, didn't capitulate. And I think Aiyuk made the right move eventually. If he would have had multiple seasons where he was playing as highly as he did last season, then I think he could have played even more hardball and probably would have gotten even a bigger contract. Maybe it wouldn't even come down to this. But when you only have one good year, or one outstanding year, I should say, as a receiver who's the 25th pick overall, who plays in an offense which may or may not juice up volume, you take some time off, that offense is still humming without you there. You don't play as well this year. You try to play out the 5th year on your contract. You don't play as well. Who knows what sort of contract you're earning next season? You want to strike while the iron is hot. And when you lead the NFL in yards per target and success rate and all those sorts of things, and you're so, intricately tied to the success of the team by not only someone who's studying every single play, but someone who's watching highlights last year of what the 49ers did, get your money while you can. Sure, maybe you could have gone a little bit higher, but I think it's kind of an amicable solution for all parties who are involved here. So the next question you got to think about is, okay, well, what does this mean for the 49ers overall? Because when you have a quarterback who's probably going to get paid, I mean, I think it's highly, 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 highly likely, despite the fact that some people don't necessarily believe in Brock Purdy that much. I mean, you can't be like great every single time, efficiency-wise, you play and not get paid. He's been great so far. Maybe if he has a down year this year, it'll complicate things, but he could get extended as early as next offseason. We'll see if it happens at that point. I think it probably will. So when you have a quarterback who's going to get paid, you're paying a bunch to Deebo Samuel. You re-upped and reworked Christian McCaffrey's contract. You're paying him. Nick Bosa, already talked about that. That was really a breaking the bank sort of deal. Nick Bosa got a really good deal there. Resetting everything. Now the edge rushers are the new number 2 position in the NFL. They kind of took a step forward really with his brother's contract, Joey Bosa's contract a number of years ago. It's followed up ever since. Receivers have now made a huge run going forward to kind of be on the offensive side, the position that's moved up a lot. So you have all these guys that you're paying. George Kittle, tight ends are a pretty big discount, but you got injury problems. You got other things going on with them eventually. So So you got all that on offense, and then we go to all that on offense in addition to Nick Bosa and having to fill out the rest of what's going on defense. And then you have Trent Williams. I'll get more into Trent Williams. Going to have some contrarian takes on what they should do with Trent Williams. And I think Trent Williams is really the line in the sand where dividing good teams who have had good fortune drafting and getting players in free agency to have a run, what divides them from the teams who are able to sustain it over multiple cycles. And that is knowing when to stand firm. You know, like the Ravens were great. The Patriots were great over such a long period of time because they were good at drafting relatively. That helped. But they were also really good at letting players go, knowing that there are certain players who are necessary to win, and there are others who are helpful, who are that put you over the top. And the reality is, beyond the quarterback, no one is really necessary. But there are rank orders where if you combine enough of the players, you can get there, but you can't bring everyone back because eventually it'll catch up to you. And eventually things may catch up to the 49ers, who are way over the cap for next year. But we can talk about how they could potentially get around that. So if you look at this season, you got Deebo Samuel on the big deal, Travarius Ward, who they signed before, on a big deal. Nick Bosa's on one of the first years of his contract, but still we're talking about $15 million for an extension for the second year of extension. It has Brandon Aiyuk's old number up here of $14 million. It's going to drop from that most likely. Fred Warner, $12 million, Kittle, $12 million, and so on. So they're fine for this year. McCaffrey's number is low at only $6.6 million because he just did his deal. So I don't think the 49ers are like impaired highly for next season if we look at it. But again, the Williams contract is going to be a big deal on how they play forward because they have levers. They have levers. Now they're at negative $28 million in cap space right now, and that's without Brock Purdy being signed to an extension. But remember, they can keep that cap hit pretty low for Purdy in the first year if they do an extension. They can't keep it as low as what he would be making though, because Purdy is as Mr. Irrelevant, his number is $1.1 million for next year. Actually, that'll get bumped up though because of hitting some performance enhancements on that for the fourth year, but very low. So they're not going to be able to keep it that low. Just the amortization on the signing bonus will have it, more in the over 10 million sort of range, but it won't be that dramatic. But they have some levers they can pull in other areas. I mean, Deebo Samuel is a pretty obvious one. And I think when it comes to signing Aiyuk, this is probably the smarter long-term move, is to say, let's bring in Aiyuk while we can at a decent deal. And then let's figure out how to move off of Deebo Samuel after this season. If you look at Samuel's contract here, for next year, he's due $16.6 million salary. They have some void years. They have some other things that are going to cause about $9 million in dead cap. But again, that's money they already spent. They have some per game bonuses, some roster bonuses, other things. His total cap number would still, the dead money is even higher. Sorry, the dead money is $15 million for him, and you have about $9 million in cap savings. But again, you have void years and other things that are wrapped into that $15 million. So that's one move you can maybe make next season. And in a way, it's not even necessarily just like cutting him, because a lot of the dead money is just wrapped up into void years and bonuses you've already paid. But if you trade him, it doesn't necessarily help. You could try and trade him post June 1st, but I don't think that'll, you don't want to plan to do stuff like that. Wait around. If you trade him, it doesn't help the cap situation, but you might be able to get some sort of compensation for a guy who has 1 year, $16.6 million left on his contract. So that's one lever I think the 49ers will definitely look at pretty hard, is what they do with Deebo Samuel. And I think it makes sense for them to say, we want This would be tougher for us to kind of like replace the Brandon Aiyuk, the younger Brandon Aiyuk and his down the field stuff than the Debo Samuel stuff that we can do with Kittle or with McCaffrey or with another receiver that we're bringing in. And of course, they took a receiver in the first round, right? Um, in this last draft, who's going to be making basically nothing. Let me see. Where is he on here? Here he is, Ricky Pearsall. He's going to be making $2.3 million. So you never know. Maybe the guy will be a total bust. But so you have that. You have him. You substitute in. You clear off not a ton, but about 10 million in cap space from Debo Samuel. You look further down the road. Fred Warner. I'm sorry. I went back to 2025 here. Fred, because I was going to say Fred Warner was my other guy here. So ton of dead money on Fred Warner. I'm sorry, no. Ton of dead money on Fred Warner. He's a guy, a $29 million cap hit. I'm not sure about. He might be like a post June 1st type of guy. Maybe you could think about, or maybe another guy that you could think about trading. Talented player. Don't get me wrong. Age 28, so he'll be entering, getting near 30. So maybe someone you could look at, and if you could find someone to say, okay, he costs $17.6 million a year over the next 2 years, his age 29 and 30 season. Can we think about moving him for then? I don't know. And then this would have to be a post June 1st sort of deal, or else you're not really getting much there. It's going to be difficult, but maybe something to explore with him. Or, of course, they look to restructure some of these deals. George Kittle, I don't think you really touch that. If you wanted to restructure and extend him out, I'm not totally against that. Although he is a little bit older than you might think, after being a guy who's was in college for a while, age 31. So you gotta wonder about it a little bit. Now, Trent Williams next year, $34 million cap hit. There's $15 million in cap savings they can have. And if they cut him post June 1st, he would really be a cut post June 1st. That's the cap savings there, right? That's what you're really hoping for. So I don't know. Like, I feel like that. Actually, it wasn't even coming up. Sorry, it wasn't coming up quickly. So you save $23.3 million for a post June 1st cut. Like, that's probably something they're thinking about a lot for Trent Williams. So all this talk about Trent Williams extension, he's probably in their target, in their bullseye for this is how we're going to get out of some of our cap situation after this season. Now, they want to keep him for this season, for that Super Bowl push. And then they're going to be a worse team next year than they are this year. And probably the year after that, they're not going to be as good as they are this year because of the collection of talent. This is the best collection of talent they're going to have. But do they want to give away too much to Trent Williams right now when he might be the number one solution they have next offseason to lowering the cap and fitting in these players? Getting a Debo Samuel in a trade, get about $10 million in cap savings there, cut to Trent Williams, get another $23 million in savings if you do a post June 1st. Spread that over 2 years. That's probably the number one solution in their minds now for how they're thinking about this. Of course, you have Javon Hargrave. You have other guys you could figure out what you're going to do with those contracts, and maybe those will also be ones that you can flip and make some savings on. But I think this is really the problem with the Trent Williams negotiation. Is he's the guy that, at least in my mind, you most obviously turn to and say, not a get out of jail free card, but because he's so valuable of a player, but it's your best lever you can turn, your best knob you can turn to lowering your cap expense in 2025 and going forward. And that's what puts me in a little bit of a different position than a lot of people when it comes to thinking about Trent Williams. And I think this is the important way of framing it. Trent Williams, incredibly awesome player. He's been an incredibly awesome player. Hall of Famer. He was already on the, team of the 2010s, and now he's had a handful of fantastic years in the 2020s so far. Um, One of the best left tackles that we've seen in a number of decades. So he is that guy. He is the guy that you want to pay a lot of money to. He is a really valuable guy. You want to hold on to. Um, but that's who he has been, and we have to always think about: are we paying for what someone has been, or are we paying for what someone is going to be going forward? He hasn't shown signs of decline yet, but we can't ignore the fact that he is entering his age 36 season right now. He's making 20 something million in cash, the second most of any left tackle in the NFL this season. Next season, he's scheduled to make the second most of any NFL tackle in cash. Now, the tackle market hasn't moved up quite the same way as some wide receiver markets have, as the edge market has. Maybe Trent Williams is like, this is kind of BS, that is not going up as much. I'm just as important or more important than those guys are. Maybe that's the case, but guess what? The market is the market. And he signed a massive extension at age 33 when he came over to the San Francisco 49ers. Wasn't like he's coming off of a bad deal or anything like that. When he signed this deal coming in and they reworked it, I mean, we're talking about cash that he has made. Let's look at this. Cash that he's made so far on the 49ers. Well, it says 20 million here, but that's because there's like some weirdness going on here. So his extension, another extension. So let's say 22 million, 42 million so far on this. And then this year, his cash flow coming in will be another 20 million and another 23 million going forward. Yeah, I mean, I could see if you think you're like one of the best non-quarterbacks in the NFL, you're not exactly satisfied with that amount versus some others, but 36 years old. And tackles are one of the longer tail positions, the longest tail position when it comes to age and effectiveness, other than quarterback in the NFL. Even then, if we look at a number of long career, outstanding players, some contemporaries, some I'm going to go back a little bit further for, uh, we're stretching the bounds of what's possible, not just to play, because we saw Jason Peters play quite a long time, right? I believe he played through his age 41 season, but to play at a high enough level where upping this contract is really a solution, is really necessary going forward. Um, let me first bring up the historical stuff, and then I'll dig into the specifics on Trent Williams. And I think like the on-off splits have become the talking point on him. And there's good and on-off splits, and there's bad and on-off splits. So we'll talk about both of those things. So first is to look at contemporaries. So let's look at some players that he played along the side with. One of them is still playing. Tyron Smith is still playing. I'm going to look at the Hall of Fame team of the 2010s, the four tackles that they have on that team. So again, Tyron Smith is on that team, still playing. Let's remember, Tyron Smith right now, okay, has played out his contract with the Cowboys, has moved on. And you think to yourself, well, he's in a different phase of his career. That's why he's making $6.5 million this year. He's 3 years younger, at least. Well, actually, I'm sorry. He's 2 years younger than Trent Williams. Maybe Williams kept himself in a lot better shape. I know the injury things come, but guess what? The injury and the declines, those things, they come suddenly. He's making $6.5 million a year now. after having been someone who just as recently as a few years ago was a Pro Bowler. We have Jason Peters, played till he was 41. Last time he was a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro, age 34. 2 years, younger than what Trent Williams is going to be next year. Joe Staley, talk about things coming suddenly. The guy didn't miss a single game until his final season, and then he was out at age 34, I guess. Oh, no, Joe Staley. Sorry. I got my Joes mixed up. So Joe Thomas didn't miss a single game through age 32 and then retired at age 33 after he missed all that time. Joe Staley, at age 33, he was still a Pro Bowler, done after age 35. So these guys do make it a long time. They're making it to their mid-30s, but no one's making it past their mid-30s when it comes to playing at this sort of level, right? That Trent Williams played at last year at his age 35 season. He's already an anomaly in that sort of way. If we go back to the team of the aughts, I guess if you want to say that, the 2000s, Jonathan Ogden retired at age 33, retired after a Pro Bowl season. So he played that well right up until that point. Same for Walter Jones. Same for Willie Roaf. These are guys that are all like playing at a very, very high level until they're just done. So maybe that's something to think about for Trent Williams too, is again, the physical toll, all those sorts of things when it comes to it. You just hit a point where you're done. Maybe Trent Williams is done. Like if he doesn't get this contract done with the 49ers, he might just retire. I think that's some possibility out there that he's just done. And then Orlando Pace made it to 34 years old, was his last season. Age 30 was the last time that he made a Pro Bowl. I don't know. We're stretching the bounds of elite tackle play. He's already stretched beyond the limit of what we've previously seen in a lot of ways, the bounds of elite tackle play, and we're expecting even more of that. We're going to give him even more. We're going to give him guarantees, not only for this year, but we're going to give him guarantees for next year too. I don't know. We'll see. And when it comes to like how good is Trent Williams, I think it comes into a lot of the on-off splits sort of stuff we see. So I pulled these numbers here. I pulled some of the numbers here for what we've seen for Williams and others. First, I'll just concentrate on Trent Williams. So I just looked at the on-off splits for every season since 2016 when I have the participation data. I think it's correct. I don't know. Some of the NFL Radar stuff has been getting messed up when it comes to participation data. So I hope this is correct. But I basically have his plays on, plays off, his EPA on or off, and what the differential is in all these different seasons. What's interesting is he kind of misses some. He's not like been an Iron Man the entire time. He's definitely missing time as time goes on. He missed an entire, holdout sort of season before coming to San Francisco also. But you look at what he's done. I think a lot of people are concentrating on this number where there was 0.16 difference in EPA per play last season when he was on or off the field. They were an outstanding, awesome, league-wrecking offense with him on the field at 0.35, and then there were 0.19 with him off the field. Well, one thing to point out here is like 0.35 is just not sustainable. Like the number that he had when they were on the field, I don't care if he played the whole season, they weren't going to be able to keep that up. That's like shattering offensive records beyond, 2007 Patriots sort of thing. And even the 0.19 when he was off the field, like that was better than when he was on or on the field the prior year before. And that's an outstanding number. So like even his off the field number, I think people are looking at the differential, but it was really just a testament to how good the overall offense was for the 49ers as opposed to what he specifically may have added to it. And for what it's worth, and again, a lot of this comes down to timing. You'll see weird players who end up being good in on-off splits that we don't really know about. The year before, there was no difference in the efficiency when he was on or off the field. Does that mean he's not worth anything? Of course not. I mean, he's worth a lot. He's an elite player. He's played like an elite player these years. But you just shouldn't quickly cite the number of, they were the greatest offense in the history of the NFL when he was on the field this one year for fewer than 400 snaps. So therefore, he's the most valuable player on the team, and you should just give him whatever he wants, despite the fact that he's 36 years old. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. In fact, if you go down there, if you look at the top offensive lineman seasons that we've seen here, I mean, Teron Armstead had this incredible season for on-off in 2022, and then it was like, the next year. But you do have guys that are near the top who are mostly good. You have Tyron Smith up there. You got Ramczyk up there. You got Connor Williams. I don't know if he's that great, but Lane Johnson up there. You got some other guys who are fitting into. They've had these great seasons and much better in a lot of ways than what we've seen from Trent Williams. But the reason that their on-off splits for these other guys are even higher is because offenses really fell off a cliff without them being there. Because of that or not, I don't know. The reality is, like, the Trent Williams on-off split is high, but the offense did not fall off a cliff without him. It was still really good. I mean, that's like almost top 5-ish sort of offensive numbers with him off the field easily, actually, especially last year when offenses were not good. So that's an important piece of context when you're thinking about how much you need him or not. If you're going to use the on-off splits as your evidence, digging into those splits tells you a little bit more nuance about the fact that they may not be completely lost without him. And the other thing, and I think which may be an analogy somewhat, is like the Chris Jones situation from last year. But Jones is a much younger player. Kind of makes sense that the Chiefs would do it, finally make it up to him. And even then, Jones kind of lost on that holdout sort of deal. He ended up making more money after the holdout than he would have otherwise, but he had to hit some ridiculous benchmarks that he ended up hitting all these benchmarks in order to get that. He got like an extra $1 million for having more than 10 sacks, which is, he got 10.5, barely hit that. He got an extra $1 million, I think, or $2 million for being an all-pro and making the Super Bowl. So they hit both of those things. He hit the snap things. He hit every single metric, and then he ended up making slightly more money than he would have otherwise after going through that whole contract holdout on a team like the 49ers that wanted to, compete and have a chance to win the Super Bowl. And obviously they did win the Super Bowl with him. So, it's complicated with Trent Williams. You can't ignore the age thing. Like, I just can't get over the age thing. Saying he's the best tackle in the NFL, he was the best tackle in the NFL. Saying he will be at age 36, where he's already extending the window beyond what we've seen before, is really tough. Especially when he's a guy where you could free up a ton of cap room next year by making a post-June 1st cut on him. I don't know. I just think the way things are aligned, and who knows, maybe while I'm talking, they're going to figure out some sort of deal. But with his attitude about things, the fact that a lot of guys just straight up retire at this age anyway, even if they're playing well, because of the wear and tear on their bodies, everything else. If he's locked into this attitude, he has prior holdouts where he's held out forever on there. If he's locked in this attitude of like, it's just not worth it to me unless I'm making some ridiculous amount of money. And then you combine that with the age, you combine that with the cap issues that the 49ers may have. I don't know if this is a situation where you just move on to Trent Williams and resolve that situation, or whether, because you're not going to resolve the Trent Williams situation in your mind, you say, okay, now we can move forward with the Aiyuk. We could just finish the Aiyuk situation. Who knows? They could go all in and bring them all back. Trent Williams is the one place where I don't know. I'd be a little bit worried. It's interesting. Okay, let's take some questions here about this, because I'm getting some commentary on what I'm saying here. So I want to address some of this stuff before I hop off. Okay, I'll go back to the beginning, and then I'll come back to this. What does your model? This is by Frederick Weaver here, who has quite a few questions. Thank you for being an active participant there in the comments. What is your model? What do you think about Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Aiyuk? I mean, I guess I'd lean Aiyuk, but just because of the type of stuff he does is down the field. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the Amon-Ra St. Brown contract, even though he's much more productive because of the type of targets he gets. So I guess I would lean there, but I think both guys are flawed. They're not Justin Jeffersons. They're not CeeDee Lambs, for me, at least. Uh, so it makes sense they're making less money, but I think the discount should probably be even higher versus some of those big contracts. Aiyuk had no leverage earlier this summer since he had 2 years left on the deal. Good to see him get his deal. Clearly important to 49ers team where no one could beat man coverage. Well, he only had 1 year left on his deal. He was going into the 5th year option, unless you're counting like the fact that they could franchise tag him or something like that. But these guys have leverage in just making things miserable for the teams having to answer questions and everything else. And too many teams capitulate to that misery, in my opinion. Ignore all that stuff. Let me see. Trent seems like a 1 year convert with some potential incentives into guaranteed ones. Yeah, I could do that. I could do that. You could say, okay, you're going to make 20 million this year. You're going to conveniently forget about the fact that you got a big bonus in the past and just say, I'm only making 20 million, in straight cash this year. So you want a little bit more money. Maybe I can float you that, but not good. Not anymore. Not any more than this season. Do not do anything beyond this season. Do not give him more money beyond the season or anything that could impair you going forward. Um, Carter Forbes here, Q&A. In the current CBA, I believe players can't be offered an extension until after their second season. That is correct. Now, it used to be UDFAs. You could do it after 2 seasons. No. I'm sorry. Well, this is actually wrong. It's not until after 3 seasons. Do you think the next CBA we will move away from this? Example, signing Stroud after his first season. Yeah. So sorry. I misspoke there for a second. You can't UDFAs after 2 seasons, at least how it used to be, and then, um, everyone else after 3 seasons. So, I don't think they're gonna move away from that, but maybe. It's just players are not that incentivized to help younger players. They wanna kinda make more money themselves. Um, Says this is another comment from Friedrich, I should say, actually, is probably how you pronounce it, Weaver. Um The replacement tackle for Williams this year was not a starting level player. Well, maybe, but they did okay without him last year. I mean, it's hard. You're supposed to be easier in the Shanahan system, but who knows? Who knows? Who knows? Okay, more here says if Trent is an anomaly, don't you just ride him until the wheels fall off, like with Brady or Manning or Breeze or Terrell Suggs or James Harrison? The past late great players walk. Trent is elite. Yeah, I mean, you ride him this season, but you don't give him a ton more money and guarantee anything for next season or whatever else that he potentially wants. Any other good questions here? Oh, appreciate this. Okay, this is interesting. What's the downside risk? If he's bad, what are the odds he just ends up retiring because of it? I mean, he could, but the thing is, if he gets a new deal, you're going to pay him cash up front for the next 2 years. So you're still gonna have to amortize even more of that over a while. You got void years on there. You're just gonna have a bigger dead money bump when he retires, and that all gets thrown forward into the current year when someone retires. So 2025 becomes more of a you got to get around all this stuff in 2025. Last comment here from Trevor again. By the way, last 2 live streams have been really good. Loving the spreadsheet stuff. Keep it up, man. Yeah, I mean, this is my audience. This is my audience, loving the spreadsheet stuff. So, yeah, I hope you enjoy watching on YouTube where I bring up some of this stuff, and hopefully I'm articulating it well enough that you can follow along even when you're listening via podcast. All right, everybody, I'm going to peel out of here. I appreciate everyone tuning in. I'm going to, again, try to do more of these. And it's not just like takes that are coming out or flippant sort of things off the top of my head, but I'm trying to put together some research for this, get it out to you in a way that's helpful, that's a little interactive. I'm thinking up new things even as I'm talking sometimes and hitting the issues in a topical, sort of timely manner, but without having to go through the publishing process on should still definitely be paying attention to it. All right, everybody. I'll be talking at you later. Thanks so much.